So without further delay, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Eric Fortenberry. Eric is a passionate entrepreneur who founded JobTread, a construction management software company, in 2019 after serving as interim CEO for a general contracting company where he built the first version of JobTread to help streamline and remedy their broken processes. After successfully implementing the platform, the company grew from 5 to 8 million in sales and increased their gross profit by 43%. Today, he's excited to share what he has learned from working with thousands of contractors across the globe. Without further delay, Eric, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate Neri having me on. It's just a tremendous opportunity to be able to share, my story and some of the lessons that I've learned, running a construction company. As she said, I grew up Dallas, Texas, born and raised. Ended up going to the University of Texas at Austin for my undergrad. Shortly after graduating, I did a very short stint as an investment banker, but created my first software company. I started it when I was 23 years old. It was essentially a product for higher education. We sold it to about 650 universities in 13 countries, had over 20 million users on our site. When the company got bought in 2015. And it was after that, a buddy of mine was running a, construction company and asked me to come out and, just see if I could help him figure out how to scale the business. And so, a lot of today's presentation is going to be about, what I learned in that role and, how we were able to, really improve their processes, their operations, grow and scale the business. And, as was shared earlier, when I stepped in there, we were about 5 million in revenue, had about 10 employees. A year later, essentially grew it to 8 million. We had increased our gross profit by 43%. When I first stepped in though, like it was total chaos, papers, binders, just everywhere. Every day the workers were coming in and turning in their paper timesheets, and that went into some folder and then got approved, and then someone typed it into this spreadsheet and it got copied over to this spreadsheet, and then eventually ultimately put into QuickBooks. And so when I saw this, I immediately knew that we needed to improve the processes. And essentially my advice at first was like, look, let's go find you some software. And so that's when I went out and I did a deep dive and basically tried everything, researched every single thing out there, from Builder and CoConstruct to Procore, Jobber. We studied everything out there. And at the end of the day though, I struggled to make a recommendation for what they should implement because, it was either, super antiquated, I could tell it was going to take a lot to be able to set it up and customize it, to meet our needs, or it was super expensive. And so, one thing led to another, and, I basically just started, building our own version. And, the company, realized that, for me to kind of just work as a consultant didn't make as much sense. And so they asked me to, essentially come on. And, my agreement was I'll give them 1 year. Everything I build is my intellectual property. So if this, had the opportunity to become my next company, then, I would have that. And, I took over as CEO. And so, within that first year, I learned a tremendous amount, in the trenches, really understanding, how a construction company needs, what they need, how, the people they put in place, the processes, the challenges. And so, today I'm excited to kind of walk through some of those key takeaways and how we're able to, overcome them and the solutions that, we created, out of a needs basis. But that was in 2018, 2019 is when we started JobTread. Basically spent, a few years, kind of recruited some of my developers from my last company, kind of built the product up. 2021, we started selling it, got it to about 200 customers. Last year in 2022, we got, around 1,000. This year, our goal is 2,000. We're already sitting at 1,750. So we're growing very, very quickly. And, it's been an exciting ride to be able to work with, so many, builders and remodelers in the industry. And yeah, but today, again, is not really about JobTread. So I'm going to just kind of dive in. And I believe we have a poll here, just kind of quick check, make sure everyone's, with me. But, what I want to focus on are kind of the key areas of what, I would describe as the job life cycle. So, we'll touch on pre-sales, we'll look at estimating, then execution, job costing, kind of all the operational sides, and then finally the billing and closeout. So I see we got lots of answers coming in here. Where do you currently struggle? Looks like estimating is by far in the lead. Got some job costing after that. But yeah, this is pretty cool to have so many people on here watching the rapid fire results come in. But so we'll go ahead and just kind of dive in. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I do want to say, like, one of the things that I realized immediately was that, like, it's so important that, we understand where and what our marketing and advertising dollars are doing and how effective they are. And so, I always encourage people to make sure that you've got a system in place, a way to track all of this information, keeping track of your customers and your prospects, all their contact information, the communications. Like, this is an essential tool that we didn't have in place. And so, again, a lot of balls were getting dropped. A lot of information was forgotten. It didn't work very well to not have one central place to keep track of all this. And so, I want to encourage everyone to really make sure that, you understand, what is working and what's not working, and then track everything. Track all of their information, the communications, being able to really pre-qualify your prospects and understanding, like, what are, the things that they need. Like, even if, they may not be, ready to make a move today, in the future they may be. And if you don't document that, then it could be very hard for you to remember to follow up. And when you do follow up, really understanding those needs. And so, making sure that you have, done a good job of pre-qualifying that customer, understanding, what is their budget, who is the decision maker. I mean, so many times, if you're talking to the wrong person who can't, make the decision or is not going to make the decision, then you very well could be wasting your time. And so, for us, it was very, very important that we started documenting all of that. And then ultimately, like, this is also a great tool, once you do have success and you get these jobs completed, like, making sure that you're asking for those referrals. At the end of the day, like, the best way that you can get other customers and have people find out about you is to ask for referrals from your existing customers who you just completed a project with. I'm a huge fan of just, if they're willing to get on video, record a quick video at the end, just asking them, hey, why did you contact us in the first place? What were your needs? How did this process go? What was your experience? Like, let's take a look at the final product. Like, that is like gold that you're able to use over and over again. And so, from an advertising and marketing standpoint, like, making sure that you're collecting that information, you're tracking it, and then you're able to use it is extremely important. I could go all day about lead generation, all of that, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. But we're going to go ahead and, kind of get into the meat of this. And so, when I was running this construction business, like, at the end of the day, like, when I looked at our profits, like, it was just all over the map. It was just I had no idea how we were going to perform on any job, right when we sold it. And, one of my advices at the beginning was like, you guys might as well just go to Vegas and roll the dice. Like, it's a total crapshoot on what your profit margin will be at the end of this job. And so when I started digging into it and trying to understand, like, why did we fall short? Like, what happened? I found that really there were two main reasons that we missed our target. And it was that we either misbid the job or we mismanaged the job. And so those are the two areas that we're really going to dive into. And that's really where I started my journey, is trying to understand that. And so when I dug into the estimating side, I found that basically, again, there very, very little documentation. Our scope of work was not clearly defined. Like, we had just total, chaos. Again, like, some of the salespeople were just making up numbers. Like, they had no idea, what actually was going to go into it. And they were just trying to sell the next job and just, bring in, top line revenue. But at the end of the day, that's not what's best for the company. And so, one of the things I learned is that it's extremely important that you spend the time and you plan out every single job. You need to build a budget, understand exactly what is going to go into this job. What are your costs? What is the labor that's going to be required? What information do we need to understand? And then do the takeoff, build out that quantity list, understand, what all needs to be, included in this job before you try to come up with the price. There are a lot of different kind of, contracting, strategies, types, if you will, where you could, sell a job lump sum, or fixed price, where maybe you bundle everything all up and together and you just give them one number. There was time and material work where basically, you might have an agreement that, they'd pay you X number, or X amount per hour, and then they'd also pay, an additional, a little bit over on top of the material cost, cost plus, another very common one. Those are probably the top three. I would say, and I'll probably come back to this a little bit, I learned that you can't sell a job fixed price and then run the job with time and material where you're paying your guys per hour and just paying, for the material. Like, you need to really understand the difference between how are we going to run this job and how are we going to sell this job. And that all gets flushed out, when you're in the beginning doing that estimate and that planning there. So after you've got that put together, again, like budgeting, it's so important. And what I realized and learned is that instead of just letting our sales guys come up with, whatever price they felt was right and what they could get, we built out a budgeting tool where they could then document, what is all of the material, what is all the labor, understanding where are they going to, use internal, employees for the labor versus subcontracting, any of the equipment. But the key was build your budget, and then we will automatically calculate the price based on our target profit margin. And so when we started doing that, we were then able to have a lot more concrete detail so that when we did sell the job, we could hand it off and the project manager knew exactly what he needed to do, what materials needed to be bought. It helped with so much more by getting that documented and organized up front. There's a few other things that I've found that we were able to leverage, with allowances and selections, contingencies. We'll talk a lot more about these here in a minute, but like the key is like, don't rush it. Make sure that you have a very accurate and detailed budget, and that will help you accurately price the job. So let's talk about pricing, because I think this is, another one of the most important things that I realized, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on. I ultimately went and started shadowing the estimators, and I was trying to understand, because like a couple of them, they could usually hit the target profit margin and did, pretty close, but then there was another group that they were just always way under. And so at first I was just like, man, like these people are just, not good at their job. This is the wrong role for them. Like something is going on that they could just consistently underperform. And so I went and I started shadowing them. And what I found out was that the guys who were hitting the target profit margin, well, they were using margin to calculate their price. The other guys were using markup. So back in 2018, at this point, we were targeting a 30% profit margin for our jobs. And so the guys that were, basically, just marking the job up 30%, they were shooting themselves in the foot right out of the gate. The most we were ever going to make on that job was a 23% profit margin. And so, it took a lot to finally figure this out. But once we did, that's when, again, we told them, put away your calculators, no more, just use this budget tool. And that will automatically calculate the price. So a lot of people, asking, what's the difference between markup and margin? Well, margin, that is going to be, it's the percentage of your revenue that is profit. So the price includes the profit, versus markup, you're just adding to it. It's just a difference between the sales price and your cost. So quick little example here, if again, we have, $100, cost, then if we mark that up, which is basically, $100 times, 1.3. So if we mark it up 30%, then the price is $130. Now, if we want to make sure that we're using margin and that we're going to end with a 30% profit margin, then we're actually going to take that $100 and divide by 1 minus 30%, which is going to get you a $142 price. So you can see there's a big discrepancy. And as you get, larger, margins and markups there, like the gap between the two widens. As you can see on the sheet, I mean, if you want to make a 50% profit margin, you have to mark up the cost 100%. And so this was just a huge, fundamental transition for us. And, frankly, when we implemented this solution here and we made the change, I was definitely worried that, our customers may push back and there might be, some issues, and that, they feel like we're just, jacking up the price overnight and not understand. But the reality is not a single person pushed back on that. And that's how I knew we were leaving money on the table. We just needed to accurately price the job. And so this is one of the biggest things that we did to increase our gross profit margin. So again, I encourage you, to really dig in and look at this. And, some of the benefits of using margin over markup is that it's just going to be much more reliable, much more accurate. You're going to have the ability to see the impact on the bottom line immediately. One of the things, like if you think about it in your accounting system, and when you look at your profits and loss statement, they're nowhere on that, and really anywhere in your accounting system are you going to see markup. It's ultimately margin. Your gross profit margin is the single most important metric that you're going to be able to see, and markup will never come into play other than it's an easier way to calculate a price. But again, at the end of the day, you should not just be doing the easy thing to quickly get a price. You need to do the thing that's going to hit your target profit margin. So this is going to make it a lot easier for you to predict your profitability and understand as the job's running, what is the impact on any one change that's happening. You got to be able to just, use that as the initial benchmark and as the initial way to calculate price. So I highly recommend, if you're using markup today, you really need to go and dig into it. We've got a great blog post on our website that kind of goes into more detail about the difference of these two. But again, it's just a simple calculation change that will help you to make sure that you're hitting those target profit margins. So, once we got past that, another big thing that I realized was that, our proposals that we were sending out were super sloppy, sometimes handwritten. I mean, sometimes just, very, kind of poor. There was lack of consistency. And so I'm a big believer in, like, you got to make sure that you have a very professional, looking estimate. Every single thing that you do, and the employees and the people that represent your company, they need to be branding your company as professionally as possible, wearing shirts, having your logo and your brand on the top of every document, every contract that they sign, wrapping the trucks or whatever it may be. Like, it's so important that you present your business and your proposals in a very professional manner. I'm also a huge believer in that, you need to be, very responsive to the customers. I'm sure all of you have had contractors come out to your house and, probably half the time, none of them respond. And you're having to follow up with them trying to get that information. Well, at the same time, if you're a homeowner and you're not getting the answers, then you're going to basically just go and keep collecting more bids. People want to buy from people they like and people that are easy to work with. So be responsive. Just take the time to get your budget built, get your numbers, understand and make it accurate, but respond. Be quick and be professional, and that's going to help you drive more deals. If you can get a homeowner, a proposal that's within their budget, and you make it easy for them to sign, make it easy for them to be a customer, collecting those e-signatures. Like, if you think about it, if you have to go, basically generate a budget or proposal, and then you PDF it, and then you got to email it to them. They got to take it. They got to download it. They got to print it. They got to sign it. They got to scan it. They got to email it back. That's so many steps. In today's age, that should not really even be a thing anymore. Make it easy for them to sign electronically. I mean, hell, a lot of people, right when you're out there, if you can kind of plug in all the numbers in the budget, generate the proposal, just hand them your iPad or your tablet and let them sign right there on the spot. Make it fast and easy, and that's going to help you drive a lot more customers. And you're just going to cut off all of that, going to go around and keep shopping and trying to, you don't need to do that. Don't let that happen. Win the deal right then and as fast as you can. Now, I'll also say I'm a big believer that, you need to give them the appropriate level of detail on these proposals. Some people, if you're doing a cost plus job, or, if you're doing, commercial work or anything where, you need to give them a breakdown of the labor and the material, you can do that. Now, I'm a big believer in, not doing that to the extent that you can, and basically, giving them kind of less detail. Sure, I'm not saying don't give them the full scope of work and outlining exactly what is going to be done in the project, because that's so important. And that will help make sure that change orders, can go smoothly, and that there's not a bunch of, finger pointing later. You need to document everything, but you don't have to break down the price. And so, we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to customize how much detail and how many line item level pricing and costs and all that information needed to be there. So, again, these are just a few things that helped us to shorten our sales cycle and to make sure that we were able to, get that as fast as possible. I see Kelly here asked, Aaron asked, is there a charge for e-sig? No, with JobTread, everything's included. We don't nickel and dime like that. But Tim asked, can we show one price at the bottom? Absolutely. If you can just show one price, that's the way to do it. The last thing you want to do is open up this can of hey, well, I see that, you're charging me, X for, these 2x4s, but I can go to Home Depot and buy it cheaper. And it's well, that's great. You can also go and, take your time, get your vehicle, go pick it up, get it to the job site. If there's issues, go back to the store, pick it up. You're using there's a whole host of reasons why, you would be charging, on top of just the material cost. But again, no need to open up that can unless you absolutely have to for whatever reason. But, I'm a big believer in kind of, figure out what's the appropriate level of detail to share. Now, the other strategy that I think is really important is, the use of selections, giving the customer, an interactive way to make their selections right there on the proposal. And I'm sure all of selections, again, these might include kind of some of the different aspects of the project that, you need to get them nailed down at some point. Some people like to have all this done up front at the very beginning of the contract, or you could have it where you give them an allowance and you could do it later. But these are where you can give them that, that good, better, best model. or if you wanted to allow them to make their own write-ins and go find certain things that, that they really like, and they could share that back, and then you go and, flush out what the cost will be and send it back for them to sign off on it. This is a great tool to essentially allow your customers to come in and control the budget. So instead of just having, here's what's included, here's the number, if you give them some options, that's where they can, make their own choices and figure out what fits within their budget. I've also, and probably one of my favorite stories from one of our customers was he sent out in his first 3 proposals, he upsold his jobs without even mentioning it. He just added some additional optional upgrades to it. He upsold an extra $13,000. And, basically, that paid for his JobTread for, many, many years. It's a great way, though, that the customer can kind of evaluate the things that, that you recommend, but let them choose. And so instead of them coming back and haggling on price, it's like, look, if that's not within your budget, well, then let's choose, some slightly cheaper options here. And they can do that with that interactive selections ability. So I think it's a great tool. If you're not using that, then, I highly recommend it. And again, this puts your customer in the driver's seat and gives them the ability to control. And so this is going to lead to more accurate estimates, more accurate budgets. You're going to increase your customer satisfaction. They now feel part of the process. They feel like they're being heard and they're getting to make those selections that, that they really want to do and that, is important to them. It's going to help improve that communication. So any specific questions they have about any of those details that are very important to them, you can have those conversations right there. It's also going to give you a huge competitive advantage because, again, you're leveraging, modern technology to let them kind of have that interactive experience where they feel part of the process. And at the end of the day, though, like we've seen time and time again, this is going to drive the sales, drive your price, because they're going to be able to add on things that you might not have ever mentioned or discussed. You can just make them aware that those are additional options without having to be that pushy salesperson. So I'm a huge fan of leveraging selections. Again, if you don't want to do it in the immediate, kind of upfront, then you can still come back in and do it later. At some point, allowances give you that ability to essentially set aside a bucket of money. At the end of the day, I never want to get a deal hung up on figuring out every single detail. And so by leveraging allowances, again, we can say, hey, look, we're going to allocate this amount, and it's going to allow you to move forward with the project before having made all of those, detailed selections. Again, you're going to have a mutually agreed upon amount between, for each of the different areas that you set up an allowance, and it's going to add some more flexibility, for the customer, and it's going to just really help you be able to get those deals moving so that you can get into some of the finer points at the appropriate time in the project. So, a lot of that's kind of the scheduling, how you can kind of, try to win more deals, get them going. But, at the end of the day, just because you can sell a job does not mean that you're going to make that target profit margin. On that second part, we struggled with execution. We misran the jobs. And so, I just quickly want to touch on, scheduling here. This is so important that you're able to have one schedule that can go across all of your, all your jobs. This is going to help you to plan out each job and then understand when you get a new job where you're going to be able to fit that into the schedule. It's going to let you calculate lead times. You can build out the different phases of the job and the critical milestones. One of the things that I always encourage people to do, plan for the unexpected, put in buffers. At the end of the day, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to happen. And if you have already taken, that into account and put that into the schedule, it's going to help you be able to manage, those nuances when they come up so that you can still hit that target schedule. But at the end of the day, what I've learned is that so many people try to just, jam in and tell every customer that they're going to start it right away or they can start it quickly, and they don't have the data to back that up. And so the thing that I've learned is that it's better for you to be able to be transparent with the customer and tell them, hey, we're scheduling 3 months out, 4 months out right now, but we're going to get you on there. Here's when it looks like we're going to be able to start it. Here's when we think we'll be able to end it. And just being able to give them that. If they are sold on you as a contractor, they're going to want to work with you, and they're going to be willing to wait for you to be able to get there so that you can have your crews and do it the way that you do it, because they're trusting you as the contractor. And so when things do come up, again, being able to understand the impact on the schedule allows you to communicate that with the homeowner. It allows you to communicate that with the subs as well. It's going to help everybody stay on the same page. Because again, things are going to happen, but as long as you're transparent and you communicate that with the homeowner, they're almost always going to be willing to work with you and can, take that into account, versus if you just surprise them and you don't show up one day. I mean, I'm sure you all have sat there and had, the customer calling you at 8 in the morning saying, where's the crew? Where's the crew? That's why, with JobTread, we love, having some of the flexibility to share the schedule, in as much detail as you want with the customer on the customer portal. And same thing with the, with the vendors, they can, and your subs, they can see the schedule ahead of time. They can understand where you're at, and then any changes, they can automatically kind of see that. And you're giving them a self-support tool where they can go and they can look it up and figure it out where, where things are supposed to happen. And that's just going to cut down on a lot of the time with them hounding your project managers. If things change, like, give them the ability to check that for themselves. And this is also very important, for those of you using subcontractors. Like, we found that, like, you got to give them as much lead time and give them as much visibility into their work and when you're expecting them to come out, so that they can, manage that with, if they're working for other companies too, like, they need to be able to coordinate that. And so the more organized you can be, the better you're going to be able to hit those job, schedules and make sure that you're starting on time and you're completing on time. Moving on though to job costing, I think we have another poll here. I'm curious. What is how confident are you in your current job costing process? I mean, I hear all the time. People, they feel like it's a lot of work. They don't know how to do it. They don't have the system in place. Like, there's all sorts of reasons why people, convince themselves that they just don't need to do it. And I'm here to tell you, 100%, you should absolutely be doing job costing. That was another one of the huge things that we started doing at the construction company. And that's how you're going to figure out where are you making money, where are you losing money. So I see we got a pretty wide array of people. Some people, feel confident in it, got some somewhat confidence, some needs help. So, again, it's something that's very important, and I'm going to dive into it here. But again, what is job costing? It involves tracking and allocating the cost associated with each specific project, and that's going to help you determine the profitability. So again, this could be your labor, this could be your materials, your machinery, equipment, any other cost that are directly related to that job need to be accounted for and calculated so that you can know your true profitability at the end of the day. And so the great thing about doing this job costing is that it's going to help you see in real time where you're at and how you're performing. So let's see, we'll keep going over here. So what is the process? So again, with JobTread, I'm a huge believer, build the budget, understand what are all the costs that you're expecting to go into it. Make sure that, again, you're getting every single line item on that budget approved from the customer, through that initial proposal, through the contracting, through change orders. Like, you need to make sure that everything has been approved so that you're not doing work that's not been approved. There's nothing worse than that. And then again, anything that you're going to sub out, to your subcontractor, send out those bid requests, collect those unknowns. So that's going to help you to make sure that you know exactly what's going to go into that. And then essentially each item is going to be approved, and then you're going to issue purchase orders and work orders, and that's going to allow you to commit out the cost. So any amount that you have already committed to pay someone, you're going to now track that. So you've got your approved budget, and then you've got your committed cost. And so just right there, that helps you in real time know when you have overcommitted, you are exceeding your budget of what you had allocated, so you can know before anything else happens, right then and there, that something has gone wrong. That is the first flag that should get thrown, is that you have overcommitted and you need to dig in. And then ultimately, once you get the bill, from the subcontractor, from your supplier, your vendor, then you can log that as well. And that is something that needs to be compared back to the PO. Did the bill match what we expected to pay? I can't tell you the number of times that we got incorrectly billed. Our subcontractors, would just add all sorts of stuff on there that wasn't part of the contract. It wasn't, ever agreed upon. We had, one example, we had our guys, we were doing, putting up a new fence for a customer, and, we basically went and built it. But then the customer comes out and just starts talking directly with the subs and saying, hey, can you just do another couple 100 feet? Like, let's just kind of also want to put up a fence over here and get that going, and the problem is the subcontractors, who at that time we were paying them by by either hourly or daily, depends on the size of the project. But like, they're like, yeah, sure. We'll just keep going, and so like then now we're doing work that we get billed for, but we didn't get paid for from the customer. This is where you can take the actual bills that come in and compare them to the PO to make sure that it's exactly what you expected. There are also times where we got double billed, and again, it's kind of hard to know, is this an accident? Was this intentional? But again, by having a system in place where you can track, your commitments and your actuals, that immediately put a stop to that. We found this like happening numerous times, because again, without having a system in place, like, you might have your people in the office are disconnected from what's happening in the field, and they may just be entering information into QuickBooks, teeing up, paying the bills, and it's just a disconnected process. And that's where, you can have huge losses occurring and not even realize it. So I think one of the biggest benefits is being able to monitor, again, your projected costs, your cost to complete, your projected, profits on an ongoing basis. At any given moment, you can look at any job and know exactly where you're at. And that helped us and helped me specifically as a business owner to figure out, where did I need to go focus my attention? Which jobs were overrunning the budget? And that helped me figure out, just those key jobs that I needed to focus on, instead of trying to focus on everything and every job. Like, I could dig into the ones that it looked like we were starting to slip. So this is just an example of, kind of a screenshot. I'm not even, it might be too small, but, again, you can see your approved budget, your commitments, your bills. If you did have employees that were clocking in and out all of their time, both the hours and that fully burdened, rate, you've got your actual cost, your cost to complete, your projected, costs. Like, there, JobTread's very flexible, where you can completely customize, what information and what you want to see on this view. But anything in red is essentially something has happened that is over budget. We need to go dig into that. And so you can then just start opening up each line and see exactly, here's what was approved. Here's the, the POs that we issued, or the work orders, and here's the actuals, because some line items, you may have multiple, POs and bills that are associated to them. And so being able to view that is going to help you understand exactly how you got to that. I'm sure, as I found out the hard way, trying to do a post-job, review after everything's already said and done, after we've already, invoiced the customer for the full amount, it could take us anywhere from 30 to 60, sometimes 90 days to get the bills submitted from our suppliers and from our subs, so you can't wait that long, because you're going to miss an opportunity to course correct or to issue a change order or something like that. So it's so important that you can essentially have that in real time. And that was tremendously helpful for us. So just to kind of recap again, what are the biggest benefits that I found for job costing? I mean, being able to course correct before it's too late. You can find excess costs that, that can be billed to the customer. Discovering where cost overruns can be prevented in the future. Like one great example of that, when I stepped in, like, I realized and I started kind of digging into the details. Every time we did a job in Houston for, it was a fencing job, we lost 10 to 12% every single time. And, when I started uncovering that, it was crazy, right? Like I started suspecting, well, there are kickbacks. Is there some fraud? Like, what is happening? How could we consistently underperform on every single job? Much less, how did we never know about it? Well, nobody was ever doing the job costing. Nobody ever looked back at how do we perform on a job by job basis. Well, it turns out we ended up basically just never updating our cost of the material. And so we were underpricing our job due to that. Again, mistakes will happen, and that's fine. But with job costing, you need to, figure that out in real time, or as close to real time as you can, and then make updates. Update your pricing, update your catalog. Don't continue to make the same mistake twice. This went on for 6 months before I figured this out. Job costing is also going to help you to improve your cash flow. By having the ability to, and again, depending on, your payment terms and the payment schedule that you've set forth with the customer, a lot of times you may be, doing it kind of in phases. And so, as soon as you've got a bunch of actuals in there, you can essentially turn around and invoice the customer. And so being able to have that information to turn around and directly bill the customer, this is going to help make sure that you're collecting, and especially if you can collect for the materials that are going to be coming up in the next phase, that's going to make sure that you're not having to put out your cash to go buy the materials. But this is where keeping all of that in one place can help you improve that cash flow and make sure that you're invoicing and you're collecting along the way. It's also going to give you the ability to have what I call data-driven accountability. So instead of, sitting down with someone and kind of just saying, you know, it feels like you're working too slow, or it feels like you're making mistakes, and it feels like none of that needs to come into play. Like, you will have the hard data to say, look, we had this amount in the budget, and, you know, the thing, you know, the whatever line item, whatever part of the budget that you were responsible for, we exceeded that budget. Let me understand why. How did that happen? You can use data to be able to hold people accountable. And, you know, again, the sooner that you can do that, the better, and the more likely that they're going to be able to also understand the impact on the overall job performance and profitability by being able to show them that data. And lastly, job costing is going to enable your business to better scale. You know, there is no reason to go and sell more jobs and scale a business when you don't know that you are going to be able to perform and hit your target profit margins. You need to have a well-oiled machine before you go and sell a bunch of those things. And so by being able to do this, it's going to help you better understand where you're making money, what types of jobs are good, what types of customers are good. And so that will help you better scale the business by doing the job costing and making sure that you're monitoring your profits in real time. All right, so let's you know, move over to cash flow. So, you know, really two you know, kind of in the whole, I guess, billing and closeout, but cash flow is extremely important. It's interesting, and it's also sad that, you know, sometimes a business can be doing great and collecting a ton of money and think they've got all this cash in the bank and things are going great, but they're not, because they're not looking at how much they owe and they need to pay out. And so, like, understanding cash flow is so important. You know, and I want to kind of break this into two sides. So we've got the accounts receivable, right? Like, that's the invoicing. It's so important that you communicate clear payment terms with your customer on the initial contracts and proposals. Like, help them understand when you are going to collect, you know, and you need to be collecting an upfront deposit, you know, and in my opinion, every single time, unless maybe, you know, it's a tiny job, you know, a couple $1,000, sure, you know, whatever, maybe you wait till the very end, but like on any large, you know, job, you need to collect upfront. And I think that that's so important to know. How are you going to get paid? Establish that and know, are they going to be paying with credit card? Are they going to be paying with ACH? Are they going to be writing you a check? You know, I mean, hopefully they're not paying you in cash with that. You know, how are they going to pay? You need to know that and establish that process up front, but then also throughout the entire job. If you wait to the very end of a job to collect all of your funds and to collect, you know, from the customer, you have put all of your eggs into that final basket. Versus if you collect upfront and along the way, then you're mitigating your risk that you're going to get stiffed at the very end. It's so important that you can collect upfront and along the way, because you're going to be able to then directly use that cash to purchase the materials that you need in the next phase of the job. You should never have to come out of pocket to buy a bunch of materials. Like, the customer needs to fund that. And so by breaking it up and having that clear, you know, payment schedule in place, that's going to help you to do that. You know, now on the, you know, on the billing and the accounts payable side, like, establish good payment terms that work for your business. Like, you know, again, with subcontractors, you know, we never paid, you know, immediately. We always delayed, you know, basically we would pay two Fridays after they submitted. You know, just have a little bit of time, because if you pay them out and then you find out that there's an issue on the job, you've lost your leverage to get them to go back to fix it. You know, if you've already paid them, it can be very hard, you know, to get them to go back out there. And so, you know, whatever those, you know, payment terms, you know, will work for you. Now, at the end of the day, I mean, they have to pay their crew. So I'm not saying, you know, delay that. Now, with your suppliers, on the other hand, like, you know, whatever your payment terms are now, if you have net 30, go to them and ask for net 45. If you got net 45, go ask for net 60. Like, the better your payment terms are, the longer you're going to be able to have to collect the cash from the customers and to just hold that and make sure that you have, you know, completed everything that you need before having to pay that out. You want to collect as fast as possible and you want to pay as slow as possible is ultimately the goal here. You know, and then also, I'm a huge believer in rate your customers. I mean, well, you can rate your customers too, but rating your vendors, your subcontractors especially, understanding how did they perform on every job. Was the customer satisfied? Was the project manager satisfied? Was the quality of their work good? You know, a simple 5-star rating, you know, it's internal just for you, but that's going to help you over time have quantitative data to understand who are your top performers, who are your go-tos, your 5 stars. Every single time, go to them And that's, in a pinch, who to call. If you've got a big job, a really important job, like, who your best guys are, use them, keep them busy so that they will be more dedicated to your company. And you got your, your 3 stars. Well, I'm in a pinch. I need somebody, I can send him out, but if you start, getting down in the 2 and the 1 stars, quit using them. You got to go and find other people and keep building that bench. And so I think that's so important, to just think about how you can, on an ongoing basis, rate your customers and really understand who's performing. And one other thing I think I forgot earlier, but like, when I took over this construction company, we were paying our subs time and material. So basically, for them, they got paid for however long it took them to do the job. Now we sold the job as a fixed price. And so having this, fixed price and then a variable cost, like immediately that had to stop. We transitioned all of them to basically bid on the job and give us a fixed price, so that at the end of the day, if they tell us it's going to take 5 days and they complete it in 3, great, good for you. You can move on to the next job. You're still getting paid the same amount. But if it takes you 7 days, well, that's on you. Don't bill me more, because I already put my numbers into that budget. I knew exactly what your cost was going to be. I added my profit. Now, if something came up and there's some additional work that needed to be done, great. Then we'll go get a change order from the customer, and then I'll issue you a change order. But one of the ways that I found out that the biggest like misalignment that we had was when I started following some of our guys, because I realized that some of these crews were way more efficient. They were getting the job done, and then some of them were just underperforming every time. And when we started tracking that, I decided to go start following them around. And I'll never forget this example. One day I showed up to the job site at 8 a.m. wondering, where is everybody? Crew wasn't there. Turns out they had to go to Home Depot, get the materials. So, that was on me. I realized we should have had the materials ready to go on the job site, ready for them to start work immediately. So they show up around 9 o'clock. There's a crew of 3 of them. Okay, so we get to work. Well, about 11 o'clock, they realized that they didn't get all the materials. They needed to go back to Home Depot. So instead of just sending one guy, or instead of calling the project manager, having us go pick it up, all 3 of them got back in their truck. They go to Home Depot, for almost another hour. And again, like, what are we doing here? Okay. You come back to the job site. Okay. Now it's lunch. So now we got to take another hour break. I kid you not, around 2:30 in the afternoon, they go back to Home Depot, the entire crew, for a 3rd time. And this is when I realized that, like, they were incentivized to drag this job out as long as possible. They were getting paid regardless. And so when we switched to making them go and, basically submit bids and bid on the job, they knew that they were bidding against others. So they had to be competitive, but it also made them stop dragging this out. They wanted to get the job done right the first time, because they knew that we were going to send them back out there. So again, this is a huge, transition for us. If there are situations where time and material makes sense, like, if someone, maybe if you're a plumber, or you've got, some sort of a, an emergency type situation where, the home is flooding, they certainly don't want you to sit there and, build out a budget and get a signed proposal. Like, you can have agreed upon hourly rates in those types of situations. But for the most part, on larger projects, remodels, like, it's so important that you have locked in your cost and you have good agreements with your subcontractors on how the billing will work and what they're responsible for. Wanted to also kind of just one thing to throw out there too. So with back to the collections, it's so important that you can make it easy for your customers to buy and pay you. Collecting online payments these days, again, it's a given. Like, everybody expects to be able to use a credit card or, make an ACH payment. Like, if you're asking your customers to write a check and snail mail it, again, that is not a good process here. Like, being able to collect online payments, and we've got a great, payment processor. Evo is phenomenal. They are able to enable you to collect online payments directly right there on the invoice. It's going to help make this process so much, smoother. And sure, with a credit card, you're going to get paid out a lot faster. ACH is a little bit of time, but you're going to know that the customer has initiated that payment. You're not going to be sitting there waiting for this check to come in the mail. And who knows with the, the U.S. Postal Service, like, it's so important that, again, you make it easy to collect those payments. It's, sure, there's some fees along with it, but that's just the cost of doing business. Make it easy for your customers to pay and make sure that you're collecting. One of the biggest things that I learned too when I stepped into this construction business, we had over $800,000 of AR when I stepped in, and like I could not believe it. And what I realized was, instead of focusing on collecting our AR, they just kept going back to the bank and taking out additional lines of credit. They were collateralizing the AR to get more loans. Like, that's nuts. That is not the right thing to do. we should have focused on collecting our AR. The problem was, though, that as we ran the job, we told the accounting person in the office to send the invoice. Well, she sent it, and she just assumed, though, that the customer, or that the project manager or the salesperson was going to make sure that they paid. Well, they had no visibility into the books, nor do you want your entire team in your books. And so we had this disconnect, and they both assumed that the other one was going to follow up, and we just never focused on it. Like, we just didn't collect it. We had over $800,000 of hard-earned money that we didn't collect. And every single day that goes by, your AR is aging, you are less likely to collect that. And we had to write off a ton of money, and that is just nuts. Like, don't do that. And I also learned that you need to make sure in your contract that you have a clause that says if the customer misses a payment or doesn't pay, then you will stop work. In some states, if you've agreed to do work, and even if the customer pays you and you stop, you're not allowed to do that, and they can come after you. Make sure that you have that in your contract. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice, but just go look into that, because that was huge for us. And while we're on it, make sure you have price escalation clauses in there too. Cost of material goes up because, you didn't start the project for several months. You want to have protection against that. Just a couple little nuggets there. But in conclusion here, like, the last thing I want to focus on is performance reviews. Like, make sure that you take the time to, review the process for every job. How did it go? How did we perform? Where do we make money? Where do we lose money? Like, this is so important that you take that time, whether it's at the end of every week or the end of, twice a week, month or monthly, or the end of every project. Like, just put that in the process. Have those reviews with your project managers, with your salespeople. It will really help you to find, trends and things that, continue to be issues. By collecting that information as you're running the job, it's going to help you, because the more jobs you run, the longer, time goes, things get blurry. The details kind of go by the wayside, and you want to make sure that you have very specific and detailed conversations about the progress of each job. And so that's so important. The other thing, taking all the photos, the files, making sure that you've archived that. I'm a huge believer. I learned the hard way. You need to collect photos before you start any work. Document the exact status of the project before you start. There's nothing worse than having a customer come back to you and saying, you know what, this other thing broke. It had nothing to do with what you're doing. It might not even have been in the same room, but if you don't have that documentation to show here was the current status, it's a lot harder. You don't want to have to fight that battle. Collect progress photos along the way. Every single day, what we did is we required our subs to submit daily logs. They had to upload their photos if they wanted to get paid. We told them, do not step foot off that job site until you share photos or videos of what you've completed that day. I don't care if you're done. I don't care where it's at, but I need, as a project manager, as a business owner, to know what was completed. And that's going to help you to make sure that you're doing the right work. I mean, one time we had this big barn door, that project. There were a bunch of these kind of big structures that we had to replace, the barn door on one of them. Well, turns out we replaced the wrong doors on the wrong building. And if I would have seen a photo of that, I would have immediately known, and that also gives you the ability when you want to check with the customer, hey, is this what you're expecting? How's this looking? Do that along the way. Don't wait till the end to get a surprise that you did the wrong thing. Those progress photos are so important. And just, again, you're collecting and you're documenting everything that's been done. And then obviously your completion photos, those are just very important too. So that the day you finish that job, the current status, so that when you walk off that job site, like you know exactly what happened. And those can also be great for your marketing. Being able to see everything that you completed is very important too. And lastly, one other thing that, another story I share. So again, I did not realize this, and I just sort of walked into it. But one day, right before our insurance renewal, came about, they said, hey, can you send us all of the your subcontractor certificate of insurances? Anyone who worked on a job last year, we need to just review those. And so, okay. So I go to the office, to the office manager. Hey, can you pull all those together? She sort of gave me a blank stare and said, well, yeah, we've got some, we collect it when they start working for us, but yeah, sometimes they don't always get it back to us. We only had about 50% of the updated COIs. We got fined $35,000. And the insurance company said, you have to pay this because of the additional liability you took on, even though there was no death, no injury, nothing bad happened on any of our jobs, but they still deemed that we had an issue there. And so we basically, got fined. And so track that. Make sure that you are collecting all of your subs, certificate of insurances, you've got their W-9s, you have all of that information that you need. It's so important. And this is going to ultimately help you to make sure that you are doing the best that you can for your job, understanding how your jobs are performing relative to budget, identifying customers, job types that have the highest and lowest margins, learn where vendors are, providing you best pricing. Don't just assume that because you've been buying from the same person over and over that you're getting the best prices. You constantly need to price check and get competitive bids from suppliers and from subs. All of these things are going to help you gain insight into where you can improve so that you can make sure that you're growing the best, most profitable business. And understanding, again, mistakes are going to happen, but if you keep making the same mistakes over and over, that's on you. You've got to have systems in place to help you understand and identify those bottlenecks and those issues so that you can continually improve and make those updates as you go. So in conclusion here, perfect business processes, profit is what happens when you do everything else right. I think all of you would probably agree, at the end of the day, we need to do that. Quick little plug for JobTread. And, again, everything I've shared with you today, these are the things that I learned. We built JobTread out of a needs basis. Our goal is to give, this tool to as many contractors as possible. We want to help you build profitable and scalable businesses, to help you get organized, to help you win more jobs, make sure you're pricing those jobs accurately and you're hitting those target profit margins. It's $199 a month, plus an extra $20 per user. It's only for your internal employee user. There's no contracts, 30-day money back guarantee. Everything's included. We have unlimited, customers and vendor, users. So, they can use the portal. We don't charge for them. At the end of the day, our goal is to provide this tool to as many contractors and builders so that you can also build highly scalable and successful businesses. My entire team has construction experience. We're excited to help you to get this set up and just tap into their experience, like learn from, the thousands of other contractors that we've helped. We have a plethora of knowledge that we can, provide you and are excited to share with you. We want you to be able to be a wildly successful company. And we think it's so important that you have a tool and you have the right processes, you have the right people in place. So if you're interested, again, we'd love for you to, you can either go directly to our website and sign up. Again, you got that 30-day money back guarantee. Some people like to try it out for themselves. Or if you want to schedule a demo, please feel free. We will spend the time to walk you through it